Very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you in the International Conference Posthuman Condition in the Anthropocene, convened by the Center for Research of Posthumanities, Bakura University. I'm very pleased to have and welcome in our midst Márk Horváth, Eszterházy Károly Catholic University Institute of Art Theory, and Ádám Lovász, Eötvös, Loránd University Institute of Philosophy. So, the title of the paper that you will be jointly presenting today is Homo Mimeticus or Homo Mimeticus and Homo Faber, Extrohuman Morphisms in the Era of Posthumanism. Sir, you have 30 minutes for this presentation. And once again, a very warm welcome and very happy to have you in our midst for a very learning and enriching session. And thank you. You may begin, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good afternoon to all participants. Just a quick technical information. Unfortunately, Márk couldn't make it, so I will be presenting our joint paper. First of all, what we wanted to do in this paper is compare two key figures in the history of social thought. The first author which I will be talking about is Gabriel Tad. He was a French sociologist in the late 19th century, early 20th century. His most famous work is The Laws of Imitation, published in 1903 in English. And basically what Tad is most famous for is the introduction of mimetics, of phenomena of imitation into sociology. Tad is also known as a sociologist for whom innovation was a key concept. So he is now known as a thinker of innovation and imitation. But what makes Tad most interesting from a post-humanist perspective is that his sociology is non-anthropocentric. What do I mean by this? Structures of imitation basically become autonomous from human agents. We are not really the masters and agents of society. It's not humans alone who construct society, but rather human subjectivity is constructed in turn by social structures. Society, in fact, according to Tad, has become largely autonomous from deliberate human action. This is what I find interesting in Tad's idea of mimesis. A more recent approach to mimesis is that of Latour, the author of the book Homo Mimeticus. Latour mentions that mimesis should be considered as an all-too-human and perhaps also non-human and post-human condition that animates anthropological, aesthetic, social, and political phenomena constitutive of the history of Western civilization, and perhaps of Homo sapiens in general. End quote. So mimesis is a more than human, even a post-human condition where collective level structures, extra-human structures of imitation emerge. What is most important for Gabriel Tad is that imitation is most primarily unconscious and a collective result of an unintended result of human actions. What is imitation in this context? To imitate means an action at a distance of one mind over another. And most importantly, social change in general is generated by beliefs and desires. Innovation is mostly unconscious and unwilled, and social changes never follow the deliberate plans of humans. Tad mentions, for example, the work of social insects, and basically Tad claims towards the beginning of his work that human society is not very different from that of social insects. That social society is mostly generated, a sort of self-generating process of unintended consequences building up on top of each other. So it's not really about rationally planned collective action. Society is composed of repetitions, according to Tad. Tad mentions three forms of repetition. This is social repetition, vital, and physical repetition. In other words, imitative, as in imitation, that would be the social. Vital would be the biological level or the hereditary, so genetics, things like this. And vibratory repetition, that would be the materialistic materiality. Basically, Tad claims that matter is made of vibrations. So these three kinds of repetition can be distinguished from each other, but however, Tad does also mention that society is not really separable from biology. So what makes Tad very interesting from a post-humanist and a contemporary perspective is that he resituates society in the continuity of reality, that there's not really such a hard distinction between the social and the natural. Tad also is also very famous today for being one of the first thinkers to use the viral metaphor. So today in internet discourse, we use very often this kind of viral metaphors. That content, fake news, information, it sort of spreads like a virus. Tad mentions on page 17 of the laws of imitation, repetitions are also multiplications or self-spreading contagions. So that basically repetitions are sort of like pandemics, we could say. And imitation, basically, if in the case of something which is becomes popular, it spreads exactly like a virus. And this has become, in contemporary digital culture, internet discourse, a very important key metaphor. What makes Tad also very interesting for posthumanism is that he explicitly rejects anthropocentrism. He claims that humans have a sort of exaggerated belief in their own importance. In the grand scheme of things, human society is not really human in the first sense. And the second sense, humans are not the center of reality or the most important agents. He claims that we should reject the anthropocentric prejudice, for example. Humans do not rule their own societies. Beliefs and desires rule over human beings. And people tend to follow those sorts of beliefs, which are the most contagious. Tad also rejects the very modern idea of progress. He says that we're not really evolving towards a better society or a more equal society. Rather, he says that sometimes contagion can even come from the past. So that there's not necessarily one direction in terms of human evolution. As I mentioned, the virus metaphor is very important, and this comes up in many later authors, such as Richard Dawkins, who claims that cultural memes and cultural beliefs are mind viruses, for example. We can also mention Tony Sampson, who writes about the virality of online networks, and many examples of this viral content, for example, on the internet. So for Tad, what is interesting is that this combination of sociology and biology, however, this is also a bit more complex. He claims that society is not separable from biology, but cultural processes have become faster than biological changes. Tad says that changes in the world of life are much less rapid than those in society. So there is a kind of difference, but not an ontological difference, we could say. It's more a difference in the kind of speed of the repetitions. In society, repetition becomes faster. This is the fundamental difference. But the building blocks of society and life and materiality are the same for Tad. Social repetitions, it's also rather complicated because social repetitions, imitation, can also be caused by biological and ecological factors. Tad mentions the wonderful example of pyramids, which emerged on several continents on Earth. There are some claims that even in Europe there were some pyramids, but we don't really know. So that this similar conditions, similar ecologies somehow drive similar cultural outcomes. So this is, although there are still significant differences, but we could say that similar ecologies do result in separate cultural phenomena which are still similar. So in this case, it's not necessarily a single form of repetition. So the three forms of repetition which Tad mentions, they come into interference with each other. So it's not that simple separating the social from the ecological or the biological. Tad mentions that the social environment sort of acts, it appropriates the biology, so that society somehow, as it becomes more complex, it integrates more and more aspects of reality into itself. And after a certain point, Tad mentions that society becomes super-organic or artificial. This will be very important in the next part of the talk. And he does mention that we are evolving towards a society, and this is over a century before the internet. He mentions that we are evolving towards a form of society where there's an instant transmission of ideas, so that there will evolve a sort of global culture in which ideas can flow freely. And so this is, Tad was also he was also a science fiction author as well as a sociologist. So that's just an interesting information. So basically, what's the key takeaway from Tad? So Gabriel Tad claims that society is basically made of self-propagating, self-organizing processes, which have become so complicated that they are autonomous from human agency. This doesn't mean that we as humans can't do anything, that we can't change society necessarily, but we always have to adapt ourselves to these structures of imitation, so that human action doesn't exist in itself. And this is very compelling from a contemporary perspective. Homo Mimeticus in this context, so this metaphor would describe social agents who live and exist inside these structures of imitation. We can't really act without imitating somebody else and the results of previous action. Even innovation or change for Tad would be a kind of counter-imitation, so that revolutionaries or people who want to really change things, they have to create new forms of imitation, which other people will then follow. So that social action is sort of embedded within this structure of collective intelligence. Tad defines social change as a kind of collective thinking, which lacks a brain of its own, but which is made possible thanks to imitation by the solidarity of brains of numerous scholars and inventors who interchange their successive discoveries. So basically, there's a kind of the structure of imitation is a collective intelligence, we could say. It's the aggregate of individual actions, well, which grows bigger than any individual. He also claims that imitation is the primal soul of social life, which is a very interesting metaphor. This brings into mind sort of all forms of spiritualism, and that there's some sort of spiritual aspect to all of this. I will skip certain parts of this, and I will just bring this into connection with Bruno Latour. Gabriel Tad with Bruno Latour is that Latour wrote a very compelling article about Gabriel Tad entitled Gabriel Tad and the End of the Social. Bruno Latour is a very famous posthumanist, postanthropocentric thinker who unfortunately passed away in 2022. Latour is most famous for the idea of actor network theory, non-modernism, science and technology studies. So Latour has done extensive work on sort of deconstructing the idea of anthropocentrism. And for Latour, Gabriel Tad is a very interesting example of a thinker who we can relate to. He claims that Tad was a sort of posthumanist before posthumanism. But why is Tad interesting? So first of all, this deconstruction of the natural and the artificial, or the natural and the cultural, this is what makes Tad very interesting. For Tad, we are basically possessed by society. That there can be no question of humans controlling or regulating society. We are sort of possessed in a way. The word possession is very interesting. So Latour claims that this relates to ownership, owning myself, but also control by external forces. And this is very in terms of mimetic phenomena and imitation. This is a very important metaphor. This idea of being possessed by something outside myself. I will just quote Latour here. This is his article on Gabriel Tad. What is a monad? It is the stuff out of which the universe is built. But it is a strange stuff, since monads are not only material entities, they are possessed by faith and desire. The verb possess takes on a great importance, but do not expect any spiritualism or idealism in this affirmation, since monads are also completely materialist. They are guided by no superior goal, no grand design, no telos. So that basically society is composed of agency plus influence and imitation. And Latour claims that this is exactly what he's talking about when he writes of actor network theories. That in essence, we can sort of break down society into different actants, but many of these are not humans. So that the non-human structures also play a very important role in social phenomena. That essentially we can talk about a sort of world building or world construction, world design, redesigning society in a sort of post-anthropocentric way. An actant for Latour is anything which constructs networks, we can say. Latour claims that actants or agents also speak through us as well. That when I use language, for example, when I talk about anything, actants also express themselves through me. That there's no question of just humans interacting. We are always interconnected in these networks. Latour says that actants express through you a sort of difference that has you, the speaker, as one of their proprietors. However, possession is another way of talking about translation. So that we are proprietors of these ideas, but we're also possessed by them in turn. So that there's a sort of two-directional aspect to imitation. So where does this leave Homo Faber? So the other metaphor which we mention in the title of our talk is Homo Faber. This refers to the human as a sort of tool-making or world-constructing agent. So how can we construct a new future if we are not in control of society? if Gabriel Tad and Bruno Latour are correct in this. Now, Latour claims that the place he doesn't want to remove humans altogether from networks, but resituate us as a sort of on a more equal platform. Latour says in We Have Never Been Modern that morphism is the place where technomorphisms, zoomorphisms, fusimorphisms, ideomorphisms, theomorphisms, sociomorphisms, psychomorphisms all come together, and that the human is a weaver of morphisms. The closer the anthropos comes to this distribution, the more human it is. End quote. So that basically our human self, as we construct it, is dependent upon these various different forms which Latour mentions: animals, technology, gods, we can say, psychology, and social structures. In his paper A Cautious Prometheus, A Few Steps Toward a Philosophy of Design, Latour distinguishes between world building and world design. To build something for Latour is sort of an authoritarian, rationalist, modern and masculinist idea, that the idea we have to start from scratch and we have to build a new society, a new utopia. This would be building, the logic of rebuilding. Latour claims that as against this idea, against utopianism, we can say that we have to redesign the world. We have to redesign planet Earth, basically, which is a very ambitious goal. But what is design? Design is a sort of, for Latour, design is all about details, about sort of changing things in a small way, but still significantly. And Latour claims that design is attached to networks. It's embedded in networks. I can't, when I'm designing a new technology or a new car, I can't entirely diverge from existing things. So I have to. I'm more involved with the real objects when I'm designing. When somebody is designing something. Of course, the Prometheus myth in ancient Greece. This is the myth that there was this god who stole fire from the Titans, and he was then punished for the crime. That Prometheus, and the reason Latour uses cautious Prometheus, this idea of caution and being careful, so that an important aspect of design is to sort of account for risks. We can't plan technologies which are too risky, which threaten the environment, for example. So that in this context, in the actor network theory, human making and human design does have a place, but it's subordinated to the whole. Latour says that as a concept, design implies a humility that seems absent from the word construction or building. Because of its historical roots as a mere addition to real practicality, sturdy materiality, and functions of daily objects, there is always some modesty in claiming to design something anew. In design, there is nothing foundational. It seems to me that to say you plan to design something does not carry the same risk of hubris as saying one is going to build something. And this connects back to Gabriel Tard's immense skepticism regarding revolutionary politics. So in Gabriel Tad, there are several mentions of revolutions, of these mass hysteria, mass phenomena. And Tad says that there's no such thing basically as a revolution, in the sense that it's always about imitation, that society is always about these more than human structures of imitation, and we can't sort of go beyond these. It's not in our power. So if we connect this back with Latour, there's a lot of things which Latour talks about, but basically he says that we need design is also about fashion and imitation. that sort of there's we need to connect ourselves back with this sort of respect for the impermanence of fashions and imitations. And we have to go beyond the idea that humans are have the power to entirely transform the world. That this idea is a sort of rationalist modern idea, and we need to sort of redesign our environments. And one idea which Latour mentions, this metaphor of the sphere. So the sphere for Latour, he takes this from a German thinker called Peter Sloterdijk. The sphere for Latour is this idea that the Earth, for example, Gaia, is one place that we need these protective envelopes or spheres in order to exist. And in this sense, yeah. Okay.
So, can you please wind up slowly in 5 minutes, because we are almost towards the end of the session, and there's a lack of time.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I will be done in 2 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
So Latour references the idea of spheres as sort of life support systems for humans, and if we connect this back with Gabriel Tard's idea of imitation, we can say that the imitation and mimetic phenomena are also spheres in this regard. So, for example, I would just show an image. So I wanted to show some pictures, but I will just put this in the chat for everyone to see that. For example, online echo chambers can also be represented as sphere, sphere shapes. So I think that spheres are very important for us to be able to inhabit online space and cultural space and society. So living inside spheres is, I think, is a very interesting spatial metaphor, which Latour mentions. So that and this is basically the point where I would just leave it here, that Homo Faber in the 21st century is an inhabitant of spheres. So there's no more sort of changing everything. We have to, instead of revolutions, we need to redesign the structures of our everyday life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. It was a very erudite and learning session, and I learned a lot of things, and which I would like to come back to as certain observations. But now I would like to open the session to our audience. And if you have any intervention, if you have any reflection, any question for Adam, please feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself and ask him.
Hi, good afternoon.
I am Diksha. I am from India, Delhi. So the question that I have that proposed, or Bruno Latour, you have talked about the theory of Bruno Latour, the ANT, the AND theory, actor network theory. So here, Latour talks about putting humans and non-humans on a very same pedestal. So do you really think it is applicable in day-to-day modern life? Or we should favor it?
Thank you. It's a very excellent question. Thank you for the question. So I think Latour's proposal in his works is it's very in one sense it is very, he wants to stay very practical and realistic, but it's also very utopian. So there's no society which has implemented Latour's ideas in detail, but there are some steps which are, I think, taking place. So he mentions this idea of the parliament of things, where non-human objects and animals and everything can be represented politically. So, and there are some steps in some countries where they are bringing laws to, for example, protect ecosystems, so give legal protection to ecosystems as agents. So I think that is a very interesting way of making it more realistic what he's trying to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We now come to the end of our session, And we'll request our audience, if they have any question, to kindly, get in touch with us over email and we can correspond. And if Adam would like to respond to the questions, because we are already facing a crunch of time. But I would like to thank you once again, and your insights on Gabriel Tard's work has also let me reflect on, it's an observation, Deleuze's concept of repetition, but I will not take it further. And I see there's a hand that is raised. I would ask our esteemed and valuable participant to please type the question in the chat, and maybe at a later time through correspondence, Adam can respond to that, because we have to move on to our next session. I'm very sorry. We would have loved to continue with it, but we have to move on to the next sessions. And thank you, Adam, once again for coming and sharing your insights and with us. And looking
you.
forward to have you again the next conference. And thank you, audience. Thank you so much.